Hey guys, and welcome to the AMA for, well, probably be May 27th by the time this is out. 26th, 27th, I'll be recording this. And it's been a little while since we've done an AMA. I'm not going to be on camera today just because I'm kind of rebuilding my office a little bit. Looking for some wall art suggestions. If you have any wall art that you enjoy, give me a shout out, let me know. If I pick it, I'll give you a shout out on air. How about that? But here we go. So go ahead and check out XETAcapital.com, of course. Subscribe to our YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter is growing rapidly, as is our Discord community. You can see just a month ago I had, joined our Discord community of 1,200 plus people. Well, we've got well over 1,600 in there at this point, so we're growing fast. And go ahead and follow us. We are going to be getting into AMA today. If you don't know, join our Discord. We have an AMA questions channel. That is the easiest and best way to get your questions submitted. We'll be doing a mixture of live streams as well as pre-recordings of this. That's kind of how we roll. It's just whenever I see enough questions kind of building up. Been really busy just kind of on the back end of the business to do one of these. So I've been meaning to do one. I apologize for kind of the delay there, but when the questions get backed up, I go in there and just choose. Try not to take the redundant one. So if your question doesn't get answered, it's likely because it's already been answered. And if that's the case, if I don't tell you in the actual question section of this AMA, go ahead and go to previous AMAs. You will likely find your question there. I try to put the chapters in along with these videos so that you can easily just click and find the question that you're looking for. And with that, let's get right into it. So the very first question comes from Louis, and actually Louis asked 3 different questions. I will answer the first 2. Briefly, the third, it's been answered, previously, but I'll touch on it. The first question is he mentioning that he's been discussing with some colleagues who are in traditional finance, Zeta and Zeta Blue, Zeta Black, and had the following questions. The first one is, he's saying that feeder funds are typically set up onshore and offshore to feed a master fund. You reside in tax-neutral locations for tax purposes, and therefore the pass-through income is sent in a form of K1 taxed as partnerships to investors. How would this work with members of Zeta? So 2 things. For starters, due to the IPO process, we are restructuring offshore, just so you know. Second, there is, and I mean this in the kindest way, there is an error in your question, which is actually what's prompting the question. And that error is a word you're using, investors. Okay? You are talking about K1 forms, and I'm even looking at a question previous to yours, somebody asking about 1099s. Okay, let me just kind of clear the air on this. There are no investors in Zeta. Investors do not exist. Matter of fact, crypto gets this wrong, okay? Crypto calls people investors and investments. That's the wrong word. If you were an investor, you'd receive a K1, you'd be KYC'd, you'd be AML'd, you'd be getting, all sorts of, documentations for tax and regulatory purposes. You're not getting that here because you're not an investor, okay? This is a bridge between traditional finance and decentralized finance. That keyword, decentralized finance on Web3 via blockchain and distributed ledger technology. If you want a K1 and you want, your regulatory typical run-of-the-mill standard documentation that you would get in a regulatory environment, I recommend you open up an account with a brokerage and invest in equities, and that's what you will get. But when we are talking about, the bridge between traditional finance utilizing cryptocurrency and distributed ledger technology, and doing so in a decentralized fashion, this is very different. You're never going to get a K1, you're never going to get a 1099, therefore you're not an investor. And there are no investments. So I want to get the words right. Your taxes are the burden that you have to bear, and we don't have a responsibility to do that, so that essentially is on you, the member. And Louis' second question, again, talking to his colleagues in the traditional finance world, when sharing information about fees and after them reading in Zeta Black, funds would be forfeited if you did not pay the fees. They mentioned this would never happen in traditional wealth management. If you invested with a wealth manager, they have a certain fiduciary responsibilities by law. They know that investments would never be forfeited. So we have to go back to the words you're using. There are no investments. If there were investments, you would be an investor and you would be invested, but you're not. I want to be very clear on that. Secondly, a accounts with XETA Black. So we don't have XETA Black public yet. So, there might be a certain number of people who don't know what I'm referring to, but XETA Black accounts are very similar to zones. So if you buy into something that you know is a sunk cost, like a zone, and you don't pay your fees outlined that you have to agree to, you're going to lose that zone or that account. It's the same thing. It's a sunk cost that you have to maintain. Thereby you ROI via the emissions. I'm kind of using that word lightly because it's all USDC based in Black, but in other words, it would be the same thing with blue emissions. But in Black specifically, emissions are USDC. You would be granted those which you can then claim, which are earned via the trading. So if you fail to pay your fees, that's a sunk cost. That account is a sunk cost. So you're going to lose that account, okay, because it's already a sunk cost. You're just not paying your fees, right? Now, if you ROI and then you stop paying your fees, well, you've ROI'd, right? So that's, again, this is where we have to be very careful to understand the difference. And I would encourage your colleagues to also study the difference. So what is decentralized finance? How does that work with Web3, blockchain, distributed ledger technology, and cryptocurrency, which is an on and off ramp via Web3 utilizing those technologies? This is not traditional finance. This is not traditional wealth management that you could just go out and open up an account with and you get all the regulatory, warm and fuzzies, I'll say. Not to be sarcastic, but it's just a point I'm trying to make. There is a vast difference between being an investor in traditional finance, whereby you've KYC'd, going through the AML process, you're getting all the tax forms and documentation, versus going through Web3 via cryptocurrency and decentralized finance. It's decentralized for a reason. So we need to understand the difference. And we don't have, once again, I'll kind of beat this horse dead, we don't have investors. Therefore, there's no investments. To answer your third question, I would encourage you to go back to the previous AMAs. You're asking why we'd want to go public. What's the reason? I already answered that in the previous AMA, so I would encourage you to go back and look that up so I don't kind of beat that horse dead over multiple AMAs, because I do see that question several times. So it was answered previously, so I would encourage you to go back and look that up. Hope that helps. And moving on. So Channy Ice has a great question. He says, if AVAX chain just ends up not being good or disappears, how easy is it to, let's say, switch everything over to ETH? Well, a couple of things. I mean, if we got problems with AVAX, we've got much bigger problems. That being said, we are working on a potential cross-chain capability with XETA. I think I'm allowed to say that. If not, I disappear, it's your fault. I'm kidding. So no, anyway, we are working on it. There are a lot of complications, not complications, challenges with it. The tech isn't so difficult as is certain aspects of going cross-chain. In our instance, we have a very unique sort of system, especially with OTC and whatnot. So what would that look like if, say, we did go OTC when we have, for example, USDT and XETA on AVAX, and somebody comes on ETH and buys, or Arbitrum and buys, or Binance Smart Chain and buys. Like, there's a kind of a challenge there. It might be have to be a built-in bridging mechanism. It might get very complicated, is what I guess what I'm saying. But it's something we are working on internally, and when we have more on that, I will be sure to keep you guys posted. But just know it's on our radar, and we are working on it. And our next question is by a gentleman, I think it's a gentleman, excuse me if it's not, but by a gentleman who has a name that I cannot paste in here because I don't have the fonts to be able to show it. He says his name is Mathides, I think, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which means one who engages in learning through instruction from another, pupil, or apprentice. Well, that's a very wise name, and you are wise for choosing it. So I apologize I can't show it, but great name. Your question is the following. Concerning the lake deposits, it's been stated in the past nothing lasts forever. So for right now, lake airdrops will continue until. Can we receive any clarity on an expected time frame one can expect to receive airdrops? Like what would happen if one deposits and all of a sudden an expiration date was instituted? Would they be grandfathered? So we are working on this internally. We are playing with some different numbers. So nothing's official or final or anything like that. We are playing with a 2-year lifespan for the airdrops for the lakes currently. The main reason for that specific number is when you take the lower tier of 6%. It gives them enough time to not just ROI, but make a healthy profit on top of that. This might be part of XETA 2.0. And in either case, we are working on this internally. If we did institute something like that, it would likely be retroactive back to the first lake. But again, nothing's been stated officially, nothing's been decided officially. And when we have more details on that, we will be sure to let everybody know. But I would not expect them to last forever at this point. I know we said that originally, but I think it's a little unrealistic to expect something to go on forever. It's just that at the moment when we released it, we didn't have an end date, but it is something we're working on. I think it makes sense to have some sort of end date. You can't just have something airdrop to you for the next 25 years, for example. I think we'd all agree month after month after month after month for 25 years would be a little crazy, just as an example, right? So anyway, more details will be shared on that. Nothing to go crazy over right now, but it is something we are tossing around internally. Thank you for the question. And again, very wise name. Appreciate it. And the next question is from Galloper, I believe it said. And he's asking, I'm sure it's been asked in the past, but haven't seen it anyplace. As we get close to the anniversary date of our zones and they expire, will we need to collect the entire amount from those zones before they expire, or will we have a time frame to collect them and the counter stops on the anniversary day? So to sum it up, he is asking, after the zones expire, is there a period by which you can go in and claim after they expire? The answer is no, there is not. So I'll put this out as we get closer because we're just a hair under 2 months now. But when your zones expire, they're gone. That's it. You can't go and claim. So my suggestion is to plan accordingly and ensure you go in there and claim as close to the expiration date as possible. This will be on you, but here's a little Easter egg if you haven't noticed this before. Once you sign into the D app with your wallet and you click View Account Details, if you hover your mouse over the zone date, you will see a time pop up. It's a little Easter egg. I don't know if anybody's even noticed that. That's the exact time they're going away. My suggestion, though, is you don't wait till the last second. That's obviously on you. If you wait till the last second and for some reason it disappears, 5 seconds before and you lose them, it's on you. So my suggestion, claim a day ahead of time or something of that nature. That would be the safest bet. Obviously, can't tell you what to do, but yeah, there is no grace period or anything like that. When they expire, they're gone. You can't claim them. So I suggest that you plan accordingly and be sure to claim ahead of their expiration. Great question, and we'll put some more information out about that as we definitely reach our first expiration of zones, which will be on the anniversary day of July 22nd of this year. Thanks for the question. And the question from Big Mama 2000, formerly Marcus Riggs. Don't know the story behind that name change. I'm sure there is one. I'm not sure I want to know. I'm being facetious, of course. Thanks for being such a great supporter of the project. His question is, any new developments regarding the debit card? There are, but nothing that I have permission to share yet. All I can say is that we have signed some agreements and things are progressing forward. There are a lot of questions about how it's going to work. Will people have the KYC to get them? How does that work? There's all sorts of questions. I can't answer any of those questions right now. At least I'm not allowed to, I'll say, just because there's still details we're ironing out. All I can tell you is that things are progressing forward and we do have some agreements in place and we are moving forward. And then as we get closer to those being ready and available, we will, of course, and I will, of course, come public and share those details with you so you can know how to participate. And that should be coming in the next few weeks, hopefully. So thanks for the question. Okay, the next question is by Alifu. I think I'm saying that right. Are we getting any update anytime soon before audits and financial reports on how the HFT has been going for the last couple of months from an insider's perspective? Well, let me just stop it there. Nobody's getting ever any insider information. That's to start with. So you're never going to get an insider's perspective. That's never going to happen, mainly due to the IPO process. That's just not going to happen. So because of the IPO process, speaking of which, and I don't mean to keep using it as an excuse, but there is a legitimate reason for it. We have the audits and all the reports and all that, but because we're restructuring, because there's a very specific process and there's a very fine line legally, what you are allowed to release and not release, what you're allowed to say and not say, what you're allowed to post and not post, especially before an IPO even happens, that right now there's just not going to be any audits, reports, any of that kind of stuff and until at least we have a process in place and have been given the green light to do so. Not that there's any issues other than the fact that, we are restructuring due to the IPO. So therefore, any kind of reports, especially when it comes to finances, especially, when it comes to doing analytics, that's a very different ball game because that's all blockchain data, right? You can go look that up. It's just an aggregator of that into dashboards and different analytics. But when it comes to business, financial reports, audits from certified auditors, that stuff has got to go through very specific processes before it gets published publicly. So again, IPOing, it's not something that we started off with doing, but it's something that we progressed into. It brings a insane amount of legitimacy, okay, to the company, especially when you're looking at traditional finance. Yet everybody in crypto has always said, when the institutions get in, that's when everybody's going to get rich, right? Well, guess what? We started off with a more gamified DeFi product, currently known as Zeta Blue. We branched out and we have a product that hasn't really been released publicly, but a number of you are testing it, called Zeta Black. That's geared more towards the traditional finance, just like we partnered with Uncharted, and that is geared more towards a very specific sector of crypto, which is the NFT market. Very specific. The kind of folks that likely would not, doesn't mean they wouldn't, but likely would not get involved in Zeta Blue otherwise, right? So that's carving out another sector. Kind of look at these autonomously, right? So you have DeFi, you have NFTs, and you have traditional finance. And, traditional finance people are not going to come into Blue, most likely. I shouldn't say all of them, most of them are not going to come into Blue when there's all these gamified elements. You got to have tiers and zones and expiration dates and rollovers and OTC and when do pools open, when do they not open, and lakes, and what is this and what is that. So that's why Zeta Black was released, right? And in the world of traditional finance, when you're going public and you are IPOing, they get that language right now. Us in DeFi might not get that so much, might be like weird. What is an IPO? How do you participate? What is private equity? What's that kind of stuff? In traditional finance, that's just common everyday knowledge, right? It's the vernacular everybody gets. So that brings legitimacy from that perspective, which is where a lot of the money is, as we kind of come to understand in crypto. When traditional finance comes in, that's where the real big money is. So to appeal to that audience, that's why Zeta Black, which is a different product, was released. And that's why we are IPOing. Aside from, obviously, the benefits to the company, it's to attract and also show traditional finance folks who want to, get exposure to things like high-frequency trading and other tools that, hey, we are a legitimate company, and you're not going to work with the Security and Exchange Commission going public unless you really have something that actually works and you're structured right and you're making money and all that kind of stuff passes. So that's the reason, and that's kind of a long answer to say that's the reason why when you go and start publishing audits and financial reports, remember, again, we're not just playing in the DeFi crypto world. We are, but we're also playing now in the traditional finance world when you're IPOing. And when you play in that world, we both have to kind of come to an understanding that there are certain processes and procedures in place that we are advised on from a legal perspective when you're going public to ensure that there's no laws being violated, that nobody gets any kind of advantage. That's why those are in place, and that's why that's a regulated environment. So thanks for the question, and that's the answer. Flow, good to see you. He's asking, why are there occasional issues with pool performance updates? I want to answer this because it's a great question and there's a great answer behind it. So sometimes there's a pool here and there that just doesn't update. Now, I'll say at the offset, if something doesn't update with the performance, so in other words, you don't go from 10% to 5%, on that weekend, you haven't lost anything, right? It's just an API. It's literally just a display issue. That data and that performance is still there, and whereby the next update, when it occurs, you'll actually see that and it'll catch up, right? So at the outset, if something hasn't updated, there's nothing lost. It's just not displaying, right? And it usually gets fixed. There's actually a reason for this. So the backend system we use, we've outgrown it, right? It's smaller. It's a DApp hosting and integration platform for Web3 applications, and it doesn't scale very well. Right, so we have outgrown it. It's designed for projects, but not projects of our size, I'll just say. So what we are doing is we are building our own system because it's necessary and it's needed. Some of these issues that you see with like display issues or something, it's usually due to the back-end system we're using. We've just outgrown it and it just fires off errors for sometimes no reason, or just, there's reasons behind it, but it just keeps breaking things on its own. So we are building our own back-end system while we also build XETA 2.0 as well. And this is not about XETA 2.0. I'm just kind of making the point that we're doing both simultaneously. So it's a lift technically, but when we are on our own system, we won't have those kind of issues, right? Things will be way more smoother and far more efficient than they are now. It just so happens that, the back-end system that we use currently, you guys probably remember this back when we used to launch pools and the whole app would freeze. That's what was going on. It was with our hosting provider that we've outgrown significantly. They just don't scale very well, and they certainly don't scale to projects of our magnitude and our size. So we have to do it ourselves once again, right? That Thanos theme. We are going to build our own, and we're building multiple things simultaneously at the same time. So when that is released, I'm not going to give an exact ETA on that just yet, but when that's released, you will see a lot more efficiency. Things will flow smoother. Requests technically on the back end will be easier, more efficient, and faster. And you won't have a lot of these issues that we'll have a lot of issues, but the issues that you do see are almost always due to, something with the back end not responding right, or lagging, or firing off some sort of error for just, weird reasons. It just doesn't scale very well. So when that's released, we will have a lot of those issues fixed. So thanks for the question. I really appreciate it because it's something that I've been wanting to bring up for some time. So it's something to look forward to. This is a great question by Owen. Does the project benefit from new users in any way? The answer is yes. No, okay. Yes. So I want to tackle this question. And the reason I chose this question is because there is a misunderstanding. There's a false understanding in crypto, especially in DeFi, especially in projects that have similar reward structures. They're called Ponzi-nomics. Ponzi is probably the most overused word in cryptocurrency. Literally the most overused word. Okay. So let me kind of clarify this for a minute. I come from a business background. I've run multiple businesses. In business, there are various KPIs, key performance indicators, that you use whereby to measure business health and growth and just the overall health of the company. One of those is a customer retention rate, turnover rate, the rate in which you keep the same people coming back. Once you've got them, you keep them, right? This varies based on multiple sectors, what niche you're in, what product you're selling. Is it a consumable? Is it not? Is it in the pet space? Is it in the health space? Is it in the industrial space? Does it lend itself to a subscription model? All these things factor into customer retention rate. In other words, how many times does somebody who buy from you come back and buy again, right? And obviously you want to know the lifetime value to a customer. How much is that customer worth before they leave you and go somewhere else, right? These are all KPIs behind of a business that you use in order to measure growth. There is no business in the world that exists where you don't need new customers. That's a fact. Now, there are some businesses whereby if you don't really want to grow and you want to maintain, I hate the word maintain. It's one of my, it's a four-letter word to me. Whether it's health or business or finances or relationships, you should always be looking to get to the next level. I hate maintain, but nonetheless, if you are running like say an online business where you sell digital products and maybe you have a newsletter and things like that, you might be okay maintaining your current customer base, right? And you don't care about new customers, but at some point, a customer will leave you. And if you don't replace that customer with another one, you are dying. That's a simple fact of reality of business. So every business on planet Earth needs new customers. That's a fact. That does not make every business a Ponzi because they need new customers. Walmart is not a Ponzi because Walmart actively goes out and markets and advertises to attain new customers. Amazon's not a Ponzi because they advertise and they've created, basically fake holidays called Prime Day, where they, mimicked them and built them right out of thin air just to create more sales for a holiday that doesn't exist. And it's kind of funny. They did it right in the slowest time of the selling season to kind of pump up sales. and advertise to acquire new customers because they are a Ponzi. It's insane that this word is just thrown around like it's lost its meaning entirely. Anyway, so again, do we need new customers? Not really, if I'm being honest. Obviously it's better for the business if you get new customers, like I just mentioned, right? There are some businesses that you don't have to have new customers, but you benefit from having new customers. Always, in every single sense of the word. Because we have a system whereby we make money, unlike any other crypto project that essentially uses tokenomic tricks to pay out people, we make real money on the back end, right, of the tokenomics. That's the main differentiator between XETA Capital and some project that comes along and has like some staking mechanism or some similar reward mechanism whereby they can't pay you anything other than a token, which is paired to a liquidity pool, which is going to zero, right? We actually have real money back in it. So my point is, from that perspective, you don't have to have new customers, but you can't always keep going back to the well to the same people over and over and over again. As much as I love every single one of you, please don't misinterpret that. I'm just saying every business on planet Earth has got to have new customers at some point. You will go out and acquire customers. Either it happens via word of mouth or it happens through active marketing campaigns and engagement and things like that. So I'd love to see the space of crypto mature from its infancy of using words like Ponzi, pyramid, Ponzinomics, this, that, because it's completely lost its meaning. If you actually go and look up what those words mean, I mean from an actual financial literacy definition, there's almost no projects that fit that definition. As a matter of fact, if a project was a Ponzi, you wouldn't know it. I'll just put it to you that way. Although it's a lot easier to know it because things are on the blockchain and whatnot. But the simple fact of saying, well, you got to have new customers, that being a Ponzi is the most ridiculous definition I've ever heard. And it just, frankly, it just kind of brings out the nascency of this space a little bit, that there's just not a lot of folks that have run businesses. And I don't mean that from a condescending standpoint. I just mean it from a literal standpoint, that there is not a lot of entrepreneurs in this space that understand KPIs in business and metrics and how to measure growth. They just think that, well, if you need new customers, you must be a Ponzi. But every business on planet Earth has KPIs whereby they measure how many people come back for a reason, because they know they have to replenish them with new customers. So to answer your question, that's a long way. Just wanted to get on a tangent a little bit to kind of clarify some things. Yes, obviously, any business on planet Earth always benefits from new customers. But you do have some businesses and projects, especially funds like the Medallion Fund, that you literally cannot get into it, even if you wanted to. If you walked up and tried to hand them $10 million, they would not take you because they're a closed fund, right? So there are some funds and some unique businesses that don't need new customers, but it always benefits a business and a fund to get new customers, right? They might close it off for various reasons, but make no mistake about it, fresh capital is not always a bad thing. So Owen, don't take offense to my rant, but I hope that does answer your question. Thanks for asking. And the next question, this will be our last question, this is question number 10. And I do understand there's actually, on a side note, quite a few questions that have backlogged in the AMA question channel. So I'll be recording a number of these, maybe over the next few days or next week or so, to try to get caught up. And so if your question's not in here, it will be in a future one very soon. But Matt Crew, good to see you around. He asks, is there a plan if the dollar starts to severely drop in value? What would be the repercussions that happen in relation to it? So I guess I would need some clarification on what you perceive as severely drop, because I mean, I've seen 8, well, I think we're between 6 and 8% inflation at the moment. That's what they're reporting. We both know it's likely significantly higher than that. You know, there's shadow stats on various websites. I keep track of this stuff. Some people debate if those numbers are really true. Fact of reality, I think we all know that because President Clinton in the 90s, this is not a Democrat or Republican thing, but President Clinton in the 90s did remove various things in relation to inflation data. Therefore, we don't measure things like groceries and gasoline, which is insane to me. That's just madness that you wouldn't measure that in inflation. But nonetheless, we know the numbers that are reported are not as accurate as they perceive them to be. So given the fact that it's been between 6, 8, 10%, you know, around that number in recent years, we know it's actually much higher than that. So I would look at it as already severely dropping in value. I think the dollar is like 90% less than what it was when it was created, something like that. It's a massive number. So I guess I don't know what you mean by severely drop, because I've already seen it severely drop. If it drops severely, though, like let's just, apocalyptic kind of scenario, not only do we have much bigger issues to be concerned with, but this is a Zeta question. It's a Zeta AMA, so I'll answer. So it can be good and bad, right? So obviously it's bad if the value of the dollar drops just because it's going to hurt the world. It's going to hurt people trying to provide for their families and pay for groceries and gasoline and their mortgages and all this kind of stuff to live, provide for their families, right? That's a really, really bad thing. That would impact people in Zeta in that same fashion. So that's a bad thing. And outside of Zeta too. So it's a bad thing overall. That means that, as far as the stablecoin is concerned, let's talk about that for a minute. So we saw a depegging of USDC. USDT is one of the only ones that hasn't actually depegged, which is that's crazy to me, but that's crypto for you right there. Nonetheless, so in reality, the stable coins, as long as it maintains its peg 1-to-1, you could have inflation dropping on the back end with the US dollar, but $15 is $15. Now, Zeta has bills to pay. Zeta has expenses like any person, any business, any entity, right? So unless our bills go up dramatically, doesn't really impact us as a business, just overall, and I honestly, even if let's just say inflation kicks in, all of our expenses go up. I mean, quite frankly, we've built a war chest. I don't really think that's going to be a problem. And we make money, remember. I don't think we're going to have a problem staying ahead of inflation because we make money. We make real money. Numbers that you almost have to downplay the numbers to get people to believe them. If I'm being completely honest, even people in traditional finance say that too. Nonetheless, aside from that, we could always switch, of course, stable coins and, play a hopscotch game if things get depegged. That can always happen. But in all reality, if it's not a matter of if, I should even reword this. It's not if, the US dollar will continue to drop, and it will drop severely, right? I think the dollar in the United States dominance is done and gone. This is just a personal opinion, just me, not Zeta Capital, just me, your chief communications officer, answering this. I think the United States dominance is over. I think this is going to be the era of Asia, quite personally. This is just my personal opinion again. So therefore, I think it's in the cards and it is planned for the US dollar to collapse, in my opinion, okay? Again, other folks in the company might have a different opinion. This is my opinion. This is me speaking personally. So if we know that to be the case, the dollar does present a bit of a threat. So, we deal in stablecoin in very short terms. So for example, you're paying your fees, you're receiving airdrops, right? What you choose to do with that is up to you as a member. There's various things you could do. I can't tell you what to do. But ultimately, we don't trade the dollar inside the high frequency trading. We do trade 5 currency pairs. We do trade, however, the gold to US dollar pairing, but we're trading gold. So if the US dollar were to, crash for some reason, the DXY, right? If that were to happen, most likely people would flock to the safe havens, which are what? Gold, silver, and now, of course, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency in general. Well, that'd be very good for us because that would mean that the pairing in relation to the US dollar to gold would go up as US dollar goes down, most likely, right? Initially, you might have a different impact, but in the short term, that would absolutely happen. That'd actually be very good for us. We'd make a lot of money in that instance, right? How we off-ramp it is going to be another conversation. If something, God forbid happens, I think we have much bigger issues. But fact of reality is there's going to be a lot of trading that might have issues during those times. These are sort of events, I would say, I'll refrain from using a certain word that's commonly used. I'll just say these apocalyptic scenarios. If we're talking about relative drops to what has occurred in recent years, we're going to continue just fine. Obviously, if we talk about some, apocalyptic scenario, that's different and nobody can really kind of tell you what's going to happen. And I would be remiss to tell you I know exactly how that's going to happen, what the impact's going to be, how we're going to handle it, all that kind of stuff. Some of these things, you plan for it as best you can, but ultimately, if you're talking about like a doomsday scenario with the US dollar, we have much bigger issues than Zeta, just to let you know, okay? But massive drops actually would present great opportunities because that means that in relation to gold, which is always known as a safe haven, would skyrocket and actually would make a lot of money for our members. So you would actually be, if you are participating with Zeta, this is not a guarantee, it's not financial advice, but if you were participating with Zeta at that time and you saw the US dollar crashing, you would actually make money and most likely, depending on the drop, most likely stay ahead of it, right? Because that just means there'd be more money made, to be very frank. Now, you have a ceiling of what you can earn, but unless you see a 20% plus drop every month, you're going to be okay, right, in that scenario, because we would actually make more. It would actually give us more ammunition as a company to serve you. So kind of to circle back, any kind of massive drop, when it comes to what we trade inside a high frequency trade, I actually think would present opportunities and be good for the company, just from, we're talking simple dollars, digits perspective. Obviously, people's lives would be impacted dramatically, not for the good. And this is why, to get on just a little bit of a bunny trail here, this is, again, me speaking, personally on this matter. But, when you make wealth, there's great responsibility, great, power comes with great responsibility. You've always heard from the movies, but it's really a fact of reality. When you are given much is expected. Consider taking care of those around you. I don't think we're headed into good times economically, if I'm just being candid. I don't going to be a doomsday preacher, but just be candid. I don't think things are going in a positive direction, whether that's financially, economically, spiritually in some fashion, some aspects. I just see a lot of negativity and a lot of bad things coming with the global economy in general. And I think it's, we are in those days where we have to consider building arcs and kind of building our own, personal safety nets for our families. And that also means there's going to be people that haven't. And it may come down to us and be our responsibility to take care of those people. So those are things to really seriously consider, maybe in your overall financial plan, of how you can give back and take care of those people who are going to probably be, in the years and decades to come, hurting as we see a gap between the poor and the rich grow significantly more. So that does it for today's AMA. I know it was a little shorter than usual, and we got to 10 questions. There's a lot of questions, like I said, that were asked repeatedly. So if you did not get your question asked, by the way, I go into the AMA questions channel in Discord, and I put a green check mark on the questions that I answer. I always do this. I don't know if anybody's even noticed it, but I always do it just so I know, okay, I've answered this all right. I don't have to go back and answer it again. If you see a green check mark, make sure you highlight it and you see my name, Showtime2KX. That means that I have answered it in an AMA. If you don't see that and I didn't answer it, it's because it's been answered. So you just need to go to previous AMAs. I try to put the chapters in all the video descriptions so you can see the questions and click them. It's been likely answered before, so I would just encourage you to go and look at the previous AMAs, watch them, and see if you see your question answered. It was either alluded to or answered, and so I would encourage you to do that. Although I do see a lot of additional questions, like I said, that have been kind of backlogged, because it's been, what's it been, 5-6 weeks since I've done this? I apologize for a little bit of a backlog. We're just busy building a lot of stuff and planning a lot of stuff, big stuff. So try to get back into a regular habit of doing these. Like I say, sometimes they're live, sometimes they're pre-recorded, sometimes I'm on video, sometimes I'm not on video. Again, I'm rebuilding my my studio, my office a little bit. If you have any suggestions for wall art, let me know. I'm planning on some things that I personally like. Maybe Rocky Balboa, Michael Jordan. Some things about our Lord and Savior, things like that behind me that'll just be kind of fun to look at. Maybe change it over time, but let me know if you got any wall art suggestions, and if I choose them, I'll call you out. Anyway, be on the lookout for AMAs coming up, whether it'll be days or a week or so. I'll try to get caught up on all the questions. I do like to keep these relatively short, right? Whatever that means, just relatively short. Not trying to answer 30 questions in a single video. I just think it gets to be too much. I'll try to answer 10, maybe a little more. Just kind of depends on how long it takes me to answer them and what my response, if I have to go into detail, it takes up a lot of time. But go ahead and answer or post your questions rather inside of the AMA questions channel. That requires that you join our Discord. Join our Discord. It's right in the description of our Twitter, all of our videos on YouTube, and subscribe to YouTube as well. Let's hit that 1,000 subscribers so we can start posting links and things like that inside of our videos to direct people over to our social media. And until then, guys, until next time, thanks so much for tuning in. We will have another AMA soon. God bless. Take care. Thanks a lot.